Is history repeating itself? In the United States, a Supreme Court justice nominee is facing allegations of sexual assault, and those claims could wind up preventing the judge from being confirmed to the Supreme Court. Well, rewind to 1991, another showdown between a Supreme Court justice nominee and a woman who accused him of sexual misconduct. Back then, it was Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill. Today, we're talking about Judge Brett Kavanaugh and a professor by the name of Christine Blasey Ford. And that's where we begin as our panel goes behind the headlines. Richard Crouse, film critic and host of Pop Life, and Samantha Kemp-Jackson, parent blogger and social media personality, Stewart Reynolds, all joining us to talk a little bit more about this. So, Sam, well, why don't I begin with you on this? 27 years ago, one of the big differences, there are many, but one of the big ones is that we're now in the Me Too movement. Do you think that'll have a big effect on this?
Well, it should have an effect on it. I remember when the hearings were going on way back when, and I remember being appalled at how Anita Hill was treated. I would like to think that in 2018, we've advanced and we realize that we need to take victims' words at their, at what they say. And I feel, though, that based on what's being said by the opposing team, if you will, that they are not so willing to listen to her. And I find that very disturbing. We are in a time of Me Too, and we need to listen to women who say that they've been assaulted. I believe her, and I think that we should all believe her. Yeah, it's interesting because of the comparisons that have been drawn to it. I mean, going back and looking back at what happened to her there, she was lambasted. Well, one person in particular. But some of those people that questioned her, grilled her, are going to be at this, if indeed she shows up.
I think actually it really shows the effect, the positive effect of the Me Too movement and things like that have had, because I remember at the time as well, watching those whole proceedings, and you almost kind of didn't sort of dive too deep into it. You're like, oh, well, some of those guys are just like that. Whereas I would never say that now. I mean, that's unacceptable. And I think we've learned that it's unacceptable and we need to speak out about it. So I think it's helped.
And unacceptable to rush to judgment, too.
I think so, too. But I mean, the Me Too movement hasn't really hit politics as like a tsunami, like it did in the entertainment business and that sort of thing. Al Franken, maybe a small number of other people have been affected by it, but we haven't seen that yet. And, when you have these sexual allegation charges that have been leveled at Donald Trump, and nobody seems to care, when we, see these coming up again, I don't know if it's going to make a difference here or not. And I hope that it does. And I do hope that at least everyone is treated with respect and treated, and the claims are taken seriously. But I don't know if it's going to make a difference.
Some people saying, Sam, well, that was a very long time ago. And others saying, why would it make a difference whether it was yesterday or, in the 80s?
Yeah, well, it was a long time ago, but, there shouldn't be a statute of limitations for serious offenses such as sexual assault. She was traumatized. She had to go to therapy. She was in counseling and revealed the therapy to her husband and her counselor, which I believe was a number of years ago. She contemporaneously told other people about what occurred, and she now wants the FBI to investigate the event. So irrespective of how long ago it was, it doesn't matter. This was serious. It affected her. And we need to look into it further, I think.
And interesting, too, because a lot of people for whom the generation didn't know Anita Hill or Clarence can look back. And, she really did usher in a new era. There was the Year of the Woman following that. A lot of people decided to get into women into politics after that, still not with the numbers that we see today. But speaking of women, out in the forefront, we saw what happened to Roseanne Barr when she made some comments, racist comments back in the day, and she was, kicked off the show, and she gave up the rights to the show. And now she says she's going to be in the show. Her character is going to be killed off by a drug overdose. She's furious about this, Richard.
Well, it really slams the door on her ever coming back. I mean, even though John Goodman's character came back after he was killed off in the original series of Roseanne. This really does slam the door here, I think, on her ever coming back. So there's that. Also, I think with the allegations that have been leveled against her, she was Ambien tweeting, there was some rumors of drug use and that kind of thing. From what I've heard, and this isn't substantiated, but from what I've heard, she is upset that the idea that they are suggesting that drug use was part of her story in real life.
And do you
by
think that's a
using this on
way
the show.
of the writers sticking it to her for all this?
This whole show has felt like a personal grudge match from the beginning. When it came back, it was like trying to prove some sort of point, and now they're rebooting it. It's just the Connors, and it just feels like they're trying to prove a point again, but different people. It almost takes away the enjoyment of the show. You can't just watch it, enjoy it. You're like, oh, well, whose side am I on? I have to pick a side before I can enjoy this show.
Some would say, Sam, that the show has always dealt with real issues of the day, and, drug use is a real issue.
Well, drug use is definitely a real issue, but I think that, the producers or whomever made this decision and green-lighted it is trying to send a message. As Richard said, she can't come back. You don't come back, unfortunately, from an opioid overdose. I have to question, though, why they chose that form of dying off as opposed to something else. I do feel that there's some type of subliminal message there, or maybe not so subliminal.
I mean, the show has always been timely. And particularly in its first run, maybe not so much in its second, but in its first run it was. And there is an opioid epidemic in the United States now. So perhaps, what we're hearing now is just the headline. Roseanne dies of an overdose, but maybe there's a social message that goes along with that death. We see how opioid use affects the rest of the family. We see, what happens when someone's addicted to drugs, and maybe it could possibly do some good. We don't know yet because we haven't seen it.
Well, what we are talking about, a lot of people are talking about Burt and Ernie today. Sesame Street, of course, iconic, adored puppets. Apparently, there is a writer that used to work with them and actually wrote a lot of the script for them, who says that he kind of based it and wrote about it based on himself and his boyfriend, a gay couple. And then everybody else said, oh, isn't that interesting? Burt and Ernie were gay. Oh, I always thought so, or that's ridiculous. Sesame Street's saying, maybe not so much. Does it matter?
I think here's the thing. I don't know if you checked before. Most puppets stop at about them just below the waist.
The waist?
Yeah. And you can actually put your hand right up there, and there's nothing there. So.
What did you think when you heard that, Richard? Ridiculous?
Well, people have talked about this online, and even before there was an online to talk about, people have always talked about this kind of thing. Listen, it doesn't matter to me. If I was a young person and thought that I was gay and could look at Burt and Ernie as a role model, great. Yeah. I would feel that, look, there are two men having a respectful relationship, and I see that, I see a role model there. If not, if you don't want to see that there, then you won't see it there.
Sam, what are your thoughts?
Well, again, I think it's irrelevant what their sexuality is, whether or not they're gay or they're straight or whatever. However, I must say that if it does help a child or children who are thinking about their, where they stand on the spectrum, and Ernie and Burt is going to help them, then I think it's great. I'm actually wondering why it was decided that Sesame Street would come out and say that they're not gay. That should really be the question. Is there a problem with it? I don't think there is, and I think they need to clarify why they said that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Sesame Street has for years dealt with issues of the day, with single parenthood. Yep. They've done all kinds of things. So maybe even though Sesame Street's now saying these guys don't really have a sex, they're puppets, and that's the way it's meant to be, maybe they can start taking on issues, and that would be helpful.
Yeah, they certainly do. I mean, they have, there's a character on Sesame Street with autism, and I mean, there's certainly things they do tackle, and they do it really well. And as Richard said, for young people watching, it's nice to see a reflection of who you are on screen.
I noticed, though, in a lot of the coverage, and people started talking about the fact, oh, yes, but they've got single beds. Yeah. But wait a second. Back in the day when they started Sesame Street on TV, there were single beds.
Marvin and Laura Petrie slept in single beds.
Yeah, my wife
the Brady Bunch.
Lucy
beds.
Lucy and
let's just do that.
But their beds, Sam, of course, didn't they have, I think they had their initial on them.
I think
I
they
think
did.
so, yeah, B&E, yeah.
So, Sam, do you think you'd see Sesame Street go in a different direction?
I don't know if I will see it going in a different direction, but I hope that it does, because I think this is a really good opportunity for them to, talk about a topic that's in the news and that can help people, help young teens or tweens who are coming out and determining where they stand.
It's funny because, it'll be a recycled debate in, years down the road.
Well, it literally seems like we've been talking about it for years already.
I know.
And when this person came out and made the statement, it maybe was the definitive word. Now Sesame Street's said they have the definitive word. A year from now, we'll still be talking.
So what's the gossip about Oscar? Like, I'm teasing
And why
you.
does he live in a garbage
And
can?
why does he?
Yeah.
We need to know that. Richard, Stewart, Sam, always great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you can join the conversation and connect with us on social media. You can find CTV News on Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat. And you can also connect with me on both Twitter @BD Thompson and Instagram @Bev Thompson.